Hello and welcome back to another episode of Go FUD Yourself. JD Gagnon here and my good friend Kiara. What's up?
You're still stuck with me. This is the last day you're stuck with me for quite a few days, actually.
Yeah, it's going to be a while. I don't know if I'm going to go through withdrawals or maybe if I'm going to replace you. I guess
I'm worried that you might find someone you like more. But if you do, so long as viewers like them more too, I'm not offended.
Typical female comment. If I'm gone, you're going to find someone you like more.
No, I just know that you get Patrick tomorrow, and I know you're in love with Patrick. And then
yeah, we have a bromance.
Yeah, like it's just a fact. We have some really cool guests coming on though. We have people we haven't seen before. So we have Token Icer is on tomorrow. He does quite a few publications about crypto. He's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Who else do we have? We have Emily Landon from Crypto Recruiters next week. So that'll be interesting. We have a lawyer. You know how we always say this is not legal advice? Well, we have a specific crypto lawyer from Canada coming on. So that'll be cool. We have an expert on CBDCs who's well published in CBDCs. So you're stuck with academics, and then we chuck some DJs in there too.
That's how I like it. Doing calls, doing presentations with people way smarter than me. Because they can say all the smart shit, and then I just have to worry about saying funny stuff.
It should be cool. And then I was actually going to be back a couple days earlier, but we had so many people interested in being on the show. So we also have Firestorm from Dexalot next week, Friday, and Bolin from DFK is coming on. Yeah, you get DJs, you get academics. It'll be an interesting 10 days.
It's going to be a good mix.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're a live show Monday to Friday. So like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. Today, we are talking about a lot of stuff, actually. We're talking about what? What are we talking about?
Okay, well, we got to start with X because we have no choice. And then we have to talk about the SEC also because we have no choice. And then we have some actual interesting news about NFTs in education, about 1inch going on Coinbase. We have to talk some more about Friend.tech and FTX. To me, these are the same now, even though they're not at all related. They're just like the news that won't go away. And then crypto Twitter's blowing up about BitBoy. And I was originally trying to avoid this because it seemed really fuddy. And then I thought, you know what? That's the purpose of our show. Let's talk about it. Let's get rid of the FUD. Let's get rid of the hype around it. Let's just break it down into what it really is.
Yeah, Friend.tech somehow makes it in the news again. I was fudding all over it on, when was that? Friday with Chair. So yeah, we'll talk about that. They were my big FU on Friday. I had an FU yesterday for this Friday.
You did? Yeah, it's fine. I don't
remember who it was. But anyways, we're also going to talk about X. I think you might have said that, but that's not. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Whatever.
You want to talk about X now? Will you feel better if you get it out?
No.
Okay.
We gotta leave some suspense here.
Okay. We're going to talk about X.
We're going to talk about X. It's going to be great. All right. Quick shout out to Avalanche. We're all going to make it. I'm a big Avalanche fan. Obviously, we've been participants there for a long time. And this is just a nice, cozy, big hoodie I got in Barcelona. So, and I obviously had the WAGME embroidered on there. Which was really timely because we're all going to make it as the market has now. It was brutal. I
think you didn't wear it for a couple months after, actually, because the market tanked.
Yeah,
remember that?
I probably didn't wear it for a while because I was not happy about it. But anyways, it's all good. All right. So let's freaking go.
Let's do it.
All right, we're back. Okay, we can start with X. So today it's like fresh news.
Yeah, it just started. Just happened.
Yeah, it just happened like maybe an hour ago, or at least that I heard about it. And so X got a crypto payments license. And if you look at CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, Dogecoin supporters think that means that Dogecoin is going to be the main currency of exchange on Twitter. I wouldn't be surprised if Elon did something like that.
Hilarious, yeah.
But there's a lot of positives to this. This is a big Web2 company, obviously, that has applied for and received licenses seemingly pretty quick. all things considered. Like Elon only started talking about that shit not that long ago. So it's pretty impressive. I think it shows that with the right counterparty, regulators are willing to support
What do you mean he started talking about it not that long ago?
Meaningfully talking about crypto payments for X.
Oh, I don't know about that. I feel like he was talking about it before he even bought Twitter.
Right. But he obviously hadn't started the application process. I mean, that was, I guess it was a few months ago that I heard him.
Yeah, that was a few months ago. But I mean, to me, this is a really natural move because of his background. Right? Yeah. Like he knows how to jump through these hoops. He knows how to fill out the licenses. This isn't some sort of wacky doodle left field move. It's something that is predictable that we expected, right?
Yeah, they're all about the hoop jumping. They're in like all these.
Are they flaming hoops, or are they just
probably?
Yeah. Okay.
Like I had a really.
I'm breaking you today. I'm sorry.
Not an offside joke there, but we'll save Evie from nonsense. Good morning. Good morning, afternoon, whatever it is where you're at, Evie. Good to see you.
Okay, so they got a currency transmitter license.
Yes, but so that's pretty important in a lot of ways because it allows obviously fiat and crypto payments to commingle on Twitter or X, which is exciting. But there's some kind of second order potential impacts of this that everybody's getting all fired up about. And that is this is starting to show that if you're a big enough reputable company that has been around for a while and the regulators are familiar with, that regulators are starting to open up to approving some of these requests for licenses. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I'll come to that in a minute. But what a lot of speculation is now in the wake of this is that the ETFs, Bitcoin spot ETFs, might be relatively close behind. Because if you're going to allow crypto payments on a Web2 platform at scale, you have a lot of the arguments that they were making before of why an ETF shouldn't be made available are kind of moot now. So there's a lot of speculation and excitement about that. Here's where I think it's maybe problematic, double-edged sword. And I'm interested in your thoughts, of course, because we usually disagree on stuff like this. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword because, at least in my opinion, because like without legislation coming out, a lot of major companies are just acquiescing to it being securities regulations.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that personally, because I think that we're all going to become securities at some point, probably anyways. That at least seems like the natural progression of most of the bills that have a higher probability of passing, focus more on securities regulations. So, but the only problem is that that's almost going to be forced if we have too many of these companies applying for and receiving securities regulation and licenses. So I don't mind it, but I think there's a good contingent of people that are saying, this is cool for the space, but it sucks for, our arguments for the regulation in the future. So I'm a fan. I think this is great. Obviously, I'm a huge Elon fan.
Yeah, but you're not going to dislike anything he does.
Not much.
Your whole worldview will change if he went the opposite direction.
I mean, if he went back to Democrat, I might even have to switch political.
That's what I mean. Like that's just how it is. I don't dislike this either. I understand that we're going to be regulated. I understand that it's going to be securities. I'm in Canada. It's already a security. I already have to claim it that way. It's not the end of the world for me. But the longer I'm here, the more chair I become, the more degen I become. And I feel that we're moving too far away from the ethos of what crypto was supposed to be. So we're just getting major players. It's just going to be an extension of TradFi, and I'm disappointed with that.
It's so funny how we diverge from each other.
Yeah.
The longer I'm here, the more I lean towards let's get regulated and get on with it.
Regulated then. The SEC has its first case against an NFT as a security.
Yeah, and this is a California. It's a California company, I think.
So basically, this company has sold millions and millions worth of their NFTs, and they are being charged for unregistered NFT securities offering.
Okay, so impact theory is the guy and his wife that started Quest Nutrition. They started this podcast.
No way.
Yeah, and they're billionaires, and so they started. That's why I couldn't remember the name of impact theory, so I had to go back and find it. But anyways, really cool people. They're billionaires, so don't feel bad about this happening. But essentially, They sold NFTs. I'm not even sure what the context of the NFTs were. I didn't hear about it. And I follow Tom Bilyeu and Lisa Bilyeu, that's their names, quite closely, because they do some wicked podcasts on like mental and personal development, professional development. Anyways, check them out. But yeah, the SEC decided that they thought their NFT was for sure security. And here we go. They ended up settling to avoid fraud and all that stuff. But,
yeah, they ended up on top though. So their NFTs that they sold were worth about 30 million when sold, and to cure the registration violation, they repurchased them for $7.7 million. So I mean, I think they did fine. But it's interesting too. So I don't know anything about impact theory. Would you put them in like the MLM world, or are they more like personal coaching?
Definitely not the MLM.
Not
world.
the MLM world. Okay.
I mean,
I was thinking that if this was, it sounds MLM-y to me, you know, that type of name, impact.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that if this was an MLM and they forewent fraud, that would be really impressive just for that whole space. But
so
I live in rural Alberta, so MLMs are a big thing here.
Yeah, they're not an MLM. They do some really interesting. So they have a unique relationship as a couple. They don't have kids on purpose, and they've developed all of these strategies and stuff to keep their marriage very engaging and so on. And they do a lot of discussion about that. They do a lot of personal coaching, professional coaching, and then of course interview a lot of people. I haven't followed them deeply for like the last 6 months, probably. So I'm not super familiar with this.
Cool. I'm just curious.
But yeah, I don't think
that they can settle though, except that also accepts that then these NFTs are securities. Don't love that. You want to talk about something else that's kind of cool? NFT?
I don't like it because I feel like it sets a legal precedent now.
That's what I mean. I don't like
that. The net is fairly broad based on at least what I understood.
Everything's secure.
Yeah. So anyways, okay, what is that?
How do you feel about NFT-powered education?
Theory versus practice is my position on that. I think in theory, I'm more interested actually in your opinion on this, given your background in secondary education. But I think this is great. I love to see the expansion of blockchain into other sectors other than just investment. It's really neat to see how the technology can, in fact, be an inflection point for some of these businesses and some of these somewhat archaic structures, including formal education. And so that's the theory. The practice problem is scale. And we talk about user onboarding, user experience, and all of that stuff. I mean, yes, this is a tech savvy demo generally, secondary education, but I mean, they're usually fairly risk averse at that point. And there's just a lot of things that I think people are going to be slow to adopt. So we'll have to see. What do you think? That's more important.
Well, so I have some academic background, a little bit of academic background, a tiny bit.
You've worked your whole career. What are you talking
about? We would qualify this as badging. So they're looking at giving you an NFT when you completed a course. And this is actually something that has been explored by a lot of academic institutions already, but for a different reason. So when I was working at one of the places I've worked, we actually looked at doing NFT-backed credentials for your diploma or degree. And we had partner institutions that were international, so that we were basically looking at a new way for people to bring their credentials into Canada. And part of that had to do with the refugee crisis that was happening at the time, because people's institutions would go up in flames, and then there was no way to prove that they'd ever gone to that institution, kind of thing. So there's those pieces that are interesting when you're looking at formal credentials. This kind of thing is more like when you get a LinkedIn Learning badge. It's something that you can display, but it really only matters to the people who are participating in that display anyways. So it ends up being this really tight-knit group that cares that you have the badge or the NFT. This is the same thing. So basically, Noah, it's not on Twitter, has put this together. Crypto Noah. So he started Know It's Owls. And so this isn't through a formal academic institution, but in theory, he'd be able to sell it to an academic institution or something to that end. And then crypto enthusiasts can get badges and they can say, look, I've done this. It probably helps with something like getting a job in Web3, or just feeling validated that you know how to yield farm now in Web3. But my concern with content of this nature is always how quickly it becomes outdated. And that might be a bias from working in post-secondary too long. But like I worked on an AI ML course at one point, and I worked on a VR AR course. And like within the next year or two, they needed new subject matter experts to update the content, right?
Yeah, everything was
and
irrelevant.
so you basically had to build the content so that it was teaching people how to learn and research so that they could stay up to date on what it was, as opposed to teaching them how to do something specific. And so so I see that this is interesting, and hopefully it helps people, and hopefully it helps, enthusiasts find financial growth. It helps people feel empowered because they know that this is a formal source. I like the idea that it doesn't have a brand. Like the Binance Academy is really good, but you always have to question what their motive is, right? Like it's that they want to keep you on their site, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. So if No It's Owl doesn't have, that malicious reason to keep you there, it's kind of nice to see.
Yeah, I think, to me, this is kind of cool. I like it because there's like continuing education for a lot of specific verticals. Like in finance, there's continuing education, law, dentistry, medicine, nursing, like many occupations, engineering. And one of the challenges is you're always shuffling paper, and you're always having to provide it to, if you're an employer or if you're an owner, you got to provide it to regulators and all this other crap all the time. And it's a big bureaucratic headache. And so this, on the other hand, could make things very easy, from queries to validation. There could be some standard way to represent continued education credits or specific courses for different things. I've gone through an interesting experience, and I think this could be hugely valuable also in, your each class that you complete. Eventually, that'd be nice to see some international standards on whether classes are somewhat comparable in complexity and difficulty. But anyways, even without that, I think—
I love blockchain credentials, whether it's PSI or ID or any of that. That's my jam. We actually have a couple of institutions in Alberta who now have blockchain credentials for your courses. So you can transfer between NATE and SATE. You can transfer between the tech institutes in Alberta, which is kind of cool. I don't know. I like that it's happening.
Yeah. I think that personally, again, if they can get to a sufficient scale, I think this is really, really
just
awesome
to be funny about it, though. Here's one of the concerns I have about continuing education and NFT badges. Is exactly what you said. You need to be comparing courses and seeing which course is appropriate and what kind of content they cover and what have you. So, kind of like the lack of expiry is concerning to me. I think that we're going to be storing a lot of information that becomes irrelevant within 4 or 5 years, and I don't know. I worry about that.
Interesting. You can send NFTs back to the 0 address and burn them. So
True.
If you feel that you don't need them anymore, or maybe they have an expiry date and they implode or something.
I was gonna say, which people, like, whatever, you take a course on whether it's crypto or dentistry and it's no longer appropriate to you, you just stop putting it on your resume. But are you likely to engage with the blockchain to remove it from your, et cetera? So I just kind of wonder how busy you will get. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that kind of data is pretty easy to, as a payload, it's pretty easy to store on the blockchain because it's not computation or stuff like that. But yeah, it would still add up over time. I think you get a few 100 million people's credentials. It could be a meaningful challenge. Yeah, I'm with you. Or again, if there has to be a backup, at least until we come up with better key management systems and so on, because what if you lose your wallet?
And what if someone steals your credentials?
Yeah.
Dang.
That's like identity theft 101. Like, all of a sudden you have a degree and you've taken all this continued education, and like, could you imagine?
Ding dong dang, that would suck. Okay.
Yeah. So there's obviously some challenges, but we can spend all day.
I was going to say, clearly I'll talk about this all day.
We can spend all day talking about challenges with anything that might come up down the road. But anyways, okay.
Well, let's talk about something that isn't a challenge, but is just cool, which is that 1 inch is now on base.
Yeah, that's not surprising to me.
Yeah, we don't have to get that far into it, but it's a good announcement to make.
and 1 inch prints money. Like they're a really interesting case study, actually. So if you followed 1 inch in the early days, they had near zero adoption for like the first 2 years. Like they built 1 inch for like 2 years of essentially failure. And then all of a sudden they released a new version where they hit the nail on the head. And the volume chart was like, boom. And it's just gone bananas since then. Like, I can't remember exactly what their daily earnings are, but it's like near 1 million per day, or over 1 million. I think it was 400 or 500 million a year right now in revenue, which is obnoxiously incredible. And so 1inch is a great protocol. I think a lot of people use it. There's a lot of trust built into 1inch now. They've been around for a while and are pretty secure and safe as far as most people are concerned. Their fees are, in my opinion, high, but all fees in crypto are still really high. We haven't gotten to, the efficient frontier yet for fees. But this is good. I think this validates Base even more. This is one of the first not first. Chainlink also supported Base early on. Yeah. But this is another big signal. Yeah, I like it. I think it's great. And
speaking of really high fees,
Friend.tech.
Friend.tech's not going so hot.
Who would have thought?
I know. One, you have to pay a lot of money to actually participate, especially if you want to have a private chat. So that's kind of weird and interesting. But also, they are trying to fine people in their reward points, which haven't been identified to have any utility other than paying them. They're trying to fine people who explore forked versions of Friend.tech.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you have to do to keep your users, you got a problem with your tech, my opinion. Yeah. Again, I've been a pretty big critic of Friend.tech. I haven't looked at it. I refuse to look at it because to me, it's very eerily similar to BitClout and Clout in general. And they failed. They had problems with the SEC. They had problems with users, with fraud, with adoption. It was essentially a big Ponzi that came crashing down all at once. What? I'm not saying Friend.tech is exactly the same, but the structure sure as shit looks like it. It looks pretty much the same, with the exception of it's actually using Twitter and X and some other stuff, which I think is a huge plus, as opposed to it being its own platform.
Well, anyways, they said out loud, the founder Racer said out loud that he's afraid of competition. So that's how this is going.
They effectively forked BitClout. So in an open source environment, how can you care that much about somebody forking you? And here's the rationale. By the time that somebody releases something, chances are you're already working on the next version. So if somebody forks your protocol, in theory, if you're doing appropriate research and development, by the time they can get to any scale, you're already coming out with the next version.
Exactly. And you should already have onboarded enough users that there's not going to be a mass exodus of your platform. And if there is, then they did a better job than you. That's just how it is.
That's capitalism, I think. So the whole thing kind of just, I don't know. The whole thing just rubs me the wrong way. The way that they're so protectionist of their users and they're completely ignoring. And the fact that the founder is still pseudo-anonymous, as far as I can tell, is insane to me. I just don't think anything is going to get to mass scale with anonymous founders that involves money. I just think it's super strange. Now, having said that, Bitcoin, sure, people can make arguments that, Bitcoin got to scale, and there's a few other assets, a few other protocols. GMX is another one that is mainly anonymous, sort of, and they've gotten to fairly good scale. But the thing about even GMX is anybody that's been around for a minute generally knows who's involved in GMX, as human beings, not just as pseudonyms. So I mean, I think that's where some of that trust comes from. Anyways, we'll have to see. I'm just not a fan of this. This has already been tried. It didn't work.
I like the idea of penalizing people who fork you, because it's just so against the ethos here. You're not going to make any friends doing that. You know who else hasn't made friends lately is FTX.
So this is just a normal part of the liquidation and bankruptcy proceedings. Okay, so now we've got all these assets on the books. We have to start paying creditors. It's kind of step by step. So they sold off a lot of their major assets that had deep liquidity, and now they've partnered with Galaxy to liquidate about $3 billion in holdings. Obviously, Novo and team are probably going to have a fairly sophisticated strategy on how to do this without crushing the markets and
That's
by
their
extension
intention.
their own profit. It'll probably happen over a fairly long period of time, I would assume.
And they're including everything: selling, staking, hedging, holding. And it's interesting to me that they're allowed to do that. Like, I'm glad so that they can't kill the market, but it's also interesting that they could technically make money while they dissolve.
Well, in theory, that's the point. Like, so
I know,
the
it's
point,
fascinating.
the point is to try to capture as much value for creditors as possible. 3 billion is not enough. But I mean, as long as there's trust that Galaxy will do this with prudence, which I think there is, there's no reason not to trust Galaxy. They're all in crypto, so they would stand to lose a lot too. What I think is interesting here is Galaxy, as far as I know, was fairly significantly impacted by the FTX debacle. So I was surprised that they got the tap, but it makes sense. Very well known. Novo's very well respected in the space. And so I think, so be it. As long as they do it appropriately, then I'm happy.
Okay, are you ready to talk about BitBoy?
This is the craziest shit I've ever heard. So
I have to say, this did blow up on my crypto Twitter yesterday. I chose not to engage or bring it here because I thought it was I actually thought it was maybe like a publicity stunt because the market's been pretty dead. There hasn't been a lot of news. And there are a lot of other, from fairly major followers, maybe not someone as big as BitBoy, but there's a lot of people who like pretend their account got hacked or pretend that there's a problem with their crappy project or whatever so that they can get some more traction on their socials, because especially now that you can get paid for traction on your socials, it's a bit of a strategy people have. So I initially didn't actually think it was real. I have to say that out loud.
So this, so for probably the last 2 years, I've known Ben as an alternate to BitBoy, and through many different encounters and so on. But a few years ago, he was awesome. Like, I watched BitBoy all the time because it was informative to a certain extent. There meaningfully was alpha. He wasn't getting paid 1 Bitcoin per post like he is now, or per mention or all this other crap. So I mean, he had a good business model, but this is generally what happens to these influencers as they get big. They become bought and paid for by their advertisers, obviously. And I don't know exactly what happened here at BitBoy. It sounds like there was some conflict from his partners.
More or less, people
TJ
said that
and
he's
Justin,
an asshole. They said that he's become
well,
incredibly difficult to work with. They believe, and more or less, they believe that now the brand is large enough on its own that they'll still be able to get the endorsements, they'll still be able to make the money, but they won't have to work with somebody difficult. It's like firing Eddie Murphy from Dr. Dolittle.
So where I was going with this was ever since FTX, he had this crazy personal vendetta. And to his credit, he was calling crap with FTX before anybody was. But everybody thought he was crazy at first. And then when it became real, he actually went crazy and went to the Bahamas and was trying to intimidate FTX, taking photos and doing all this crazy shit. And so, I mean, sometimes, you make a pile of money and you maybe get a little bit bored or something. And sometimes egos get a little big. I don't know if that's the case here, but yeah, he's done a lot of questionable stuff publicly, which probably harmed the business. I mean, out of principle, I would not advertise with BitBoy crypto at all now.
So there is also a theory that this is a publicity stunt that's staged, but it was because he needed to leave the company because of some of his personal liabilities.
Well, he's probably got some, I would assume. One sec. Sorry, I'm late for my next call, but so I would assume, and I have no reason to actually believe this, pure speculation. But I would assume he's probably been contacted a few times by regulators because for especially last cycle, BitBoy was pretty commonly understood as a pump and dump calls channel, paid by protocols to talk favorably about their coins. Generally, they buy the coins first, and so does the rest of the BitBoy inner circle community. Then it pumps, then they all dump, and it's a big disaster. I don't know where the line is there, but we have talked a lot about, fairly well-known influencers getting in trouble for giving what is akin to financial advice without licenses. So hopefully he's not in deep shit, but that could be a thing too. So I guess let's find out.
There's some FUD for you.
There's some fun. All right. So we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Like, share, subscribe. We're on all the venues, soon to be on RSS feeds also for podcasts. So super excited about that. Tomorrow we have a special guest, and actually we have a special guest for like the next 8 or 9 episodes or something, because Kiara's gone gallivanting. So we'll see y'all tomorrow. And with that, I say to you, Kiara, have a great vacation and
thanks.
go
find yourself.
Later.